Vice Mayor Kilgore, we are now live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vice Mayor Kilgore, and I'm Chair of the Boards and Commissions Mid-Committee. And I'd like to welcome you to the October 10th, 2023 remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. And to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. And we are streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live. And for those out there with us today, we'd like to welcome you. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9478. And your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. And at this point, speakers, you will need to press *3 to enter into the speaker queue. And at this time, I'd like to do a roll call and introduce the audience to the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good afternoon.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Good afternoon.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Hello, good afternoon.
Deputy City Clerk Sarah Gross.
Hello.
Assistant City Clerk Jerry Goldberg.
Hello.
And Equity and Inclusion Department Director Brenda Mills.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, and we also have Planning and Zoning Commission candidates today who will introduce themselves in the interview. And we'll have additional staff in Equity and Inclusion Department and Legal who will also introduce themselves when we get to them on the agenda. And at this time, I'd like to check and see if there's any public comments, Sarah.
We do have a caller in the queue. I will open that line in one moment.
Thank you.
Jerry, did you?
Jerry?
Yes, I apologize, Vice Mayor Kilgore. We need approval of the minutes from August 22nd prior to public comment, if we may.
Oh, you do? Okay, okay.
This is Kim, so moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and roll call, Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Aye.
Okay, Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion passes.
Excellent. I will open the queue now.
Thank you.
Caller ending in 6029. Your line is now open. Caller ending in 6029.
Do you want me to get on public?
I'm not sure if the caller is able to hear me.
Caller ending in 6029. Are you on the line?
The line's open. Apologies, we're working through this. One moment.
If it helps, the caller messaged me and says, I'm the caller on the line. I can hear staff and are unmuted, but they can't hear me.
That's exactly it. I'm wondering if we can makeshift a workaround.
Maybe give an office line and just hold it up to a
Exactly.
microphone or something.
Yes.
Sarah, it looks like the public input line is muted.
It's not showing that on my end. I have Katie here.
What's up?
This line looks muted, but over here it's not.
I don't know.
I'm going to go ahead and give my office line, if that's okay. If caller, you can hear us. It is area code 828-259-5839, and that's going to be my office line.
You should have a call coming in.
Can't hear any. Like she was.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, one moment. I'm going to get the caller on. Hi, are you still there? Okay, just give me one moment. Committee, can you hear the caller?
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, My name is Patrick Conan. I'm from East West Asheville. First, I want to express my appreciation to staff for working with me to allow me to make public comment today. I wanted to make public comment on new business item number 2, the proposed changes to the HRCA ordinance. While I'm not terribly concerned by the language change proposed, I did want to highlight some concerns regarding the staff report and the presentation as to why these changes are being put in place. The staff report states that recent decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court have altered the legal framework by which municipal boards and commission membership may be selected. I don't believe that that's an accurate interpretation of the recent Supreme Court decisions, and I'm concerned that city staff are in an overly broad interpretation of those Supreme Court decisions in a way that could negatively impact several important initiatives that the city is pursuing, not the least of which is the Reparations Commission effort, the Minority Business and Inclusion Program, and any other program that the city seeks to put into place. I would just ask that this committee and staff carefully review the staff report and presentation. And if city legal staff feels that that interpretation of the Supreme Court cases is not accurate, I feel that it's really important that the public, council, and our community has that clarity. I just worry that if we look at that Supreme Court decision and interpret it too broadly, it could severely limit the city's need to do important work to make amends, to do reparations for many programs the city has enacted in the past that have caused harm. So my concern is not really with the language changes, rather it's the justification included in the public staff report and the public presentation for both this committee and for the council consent agenda tonight. I feel that these need clarification and a bit more discussion from council members and staff, both at this meeting and at council tonight. So I would encourage council to consider pulling this off the consent agenda so that the public can get a clear understanding of why this revision to the HRCA ordinance is being considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Katie, are there any other calls or on the line?
Thank you.
That's it? Okay, great. Okay, well, the first item of business is to conduct the 3 planning and zoning interviews. And this is our second round of interviews. And on August 22nd, this committee interviewed 5 candidates, but no one has asked to be removed, so those candidates are still there. The 4 that we will be considering this afternoon will be on today with interviews. And each interview will be 8 minutes. The candidates and clerk will note when you have 2 minutes remaining in the chat, and they will raise their hand to give you an idea of the time. Okay, appointments will be made this evening during the City Council's 5 o'clock meeting. And we'd like to welcome everyone to have a chance to be able to watch these interviews. Please do before the meeting today at 5. And if there are no objections, we will begin our interview with our first candidate. Okay, well, our first candidate will be Joseph Chesler.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Vice Mayor and council ladies, Mosley and Roney. Did you want me to make an opening statement or respond to questions?
So that would be good if you could just sort of just give us some information about yourself and then just leave a little time for questions that we may have at the end.
Very good.
Great, Joseph. Thank you.
Very good. I'll be brief. My name is Joe Chesler. I'm a resident of West Asheville. I retired in 2006 as an urban planner and an environmental planner. Most of my professional career has been in California. We moved to Hendersonville in 06, and then recently, in the last 6 years, been a resident of Asheville, a homeowner in West Asheville near Hall Fletcher. I have over 40 years of experience in urban planning and environmental planning, which I have a perspective that which is one of the primary reasons I moved to Asheville to enjoy the great outdoors and experience the wonderful infrastructure and culture that makes Asheville so unique. I'm honored to be considered for the Planning and Zoning Commission. I currently serve as a commissioner on your Multimodal Transportation Commission, which, if appointed to P&Z, I would move laterally from that with your concurrence, and help to provide thoughtful input and oversight to the policies and projects that make Asheville such a wonderful place to live and work, and make the decisions that we make beneficial to all of us here in the Asheville area. I feel I have a unique experience with my professional background and love of the outdoors and multimodal experience in bicycling and transit, and look forward to helping to provide that perspective going forward.
Thank you, Joseph. Do we have a questions, or someone have a question for Joseph? Okay. Councilwoman Rooney?
Thank you so much, Joseph, for applying to serve on our Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm carrying forward my same question from our last interview series, which is, in our strategic priorities adopted by council in this year's budget, we included direction to revise Chapter 7 of our UDO. What are some creative solutions you suggest for zoning changes we face, housing, climate change? How can zoning help us meet our strategic priorities around housing, core services, reparations, climate and neighborhood resiliency, and then maybe what are the barriers to implementing our solutions?
Well, I'm certainly familiar with the UDO. I can't recall specifically Chapter 7's emphasis, but I will say zoning has a place in helping to form our city of the that the public can safely enjoy. I am a little startled by what I see as areas of our city that are not easily accessible to all. And so I look to some of the zoning provisions that would help to widen sidewalks, provide buffer zones, control density and public forum as these projects come before us. Certainly, the conformance with the comprehensive plan and the vision that the city has adopted are important elements to that the UDO must conform with, and I look forward to helping to interpret those as we go forward, providing advice for the council in their decision making.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure I covered all the bases, but.
Councilwoman Mosley?
So I appreciate your response and thanks for joining us this afternoon. I am impressed by your background for sure. I'm wondering, and this is actually a question I'd asked before. I think it's pretty evident that in Asheville we need more housing. Do you have any ideas about how to balance our needs for growth with what inevitably neighborhoods say they need? How do we balance those two?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. I don't have any magic bullets, but I feel that inclusion is clearly one tool that's been used successfully around the world. In California, my experience was always about inclusionary zoning, where you have a combination of wage earners and income levels, as well as uses that provide an atmosphere for people or an environment for people to interact on a daily basis, and therefore build understanding and more comprehensive activities. There are various tools to be used where different styles of housing can provide that type of interaction that we oftentimes lose with single-family developments, and I would like to see, and some multifamily as well, where you're locking people out from each other's interaction. I would like to see more inclusion in the fabric of our community to build those bridges.
Thank you, Joseph. And I would like to ask you, Joseph, you said you've been here 6 years and coming from another locale, of course, and what do you see as your number one item that you see, that could help improve our community? What would you suggest?
Well, I think it's access to the natural beauty around us, as well as having access to culture and educational opportunities in the community. That's principally why I moved to this part of North Carolina originally, was to have those amenities accessible and easily achievable. And I've done my utmost to engage in all of those areas of interest. I'm a member of the Art Museum. I participate in programs at AB Tech and at UNCA, as well as the various cultural opportunities we have in town. So the combination of those three is what brought me to this region, and then later in my time here, moved me from the rural parts of Henderson County to Asheville.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And at this time, Sarah, we'd like to move on to our second candidate. It will be Alvarez Abernathy. He'll be joining us.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Kilgore, Council Member Ronnie, and Council Member Mosley. Again, as been said proper for me, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you about the Zoning and Planning Commission. I'll just talk briefly about, have some education, undergraduate degree in urban affairs and community affairs, a master's degree in urban affairs and policy analysis, and a law degree from Wake Forest. I have a general crime practice license here in North and South Carolina, and I've been in Asheville for about 9 years this time. I'm from Charlotte originally. I just want to make the community healthy for all residents, in particular those that have been disenfranchised. And I recognize that affordability, housing affordability is an issue. I was a real estate agent here in Asheville for a while. About 4 or 5 years ago, a home for $250,000 stayed on the market for 30 days. Now a home for $350,000 stays on the market for less than 30 days. So we do have that challenge of housing, and there's not a singular thing, but I know that has to be a collaborative effort among merchants, developers, nonprofits, and government officials in order to make it work. So that's what I'll say in my opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Abernathy. And I was, like I said, I was very impressed also with your, background, and it's so diverse. And by having that diversity, you're able to sort of look at things from different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So the one question I'd like to ask you is, what do you think would be the number one thing in planning and zoning that we could sort of do that you see that could actually improve our housing situation here?
Vice Mayor Kilgore, I think that after listening to some of the other candidates for the planning and zoning, I heard David Mortez talk about the urban zone and how that has constricted the zoning for suburban living. I think that one of the other things we might have to consider is that our single-family dwelling zoning areas may not be as precious as we want them to be in terms of not allowing multi-use and triplexes and things like that. In my own neighborhood where I'm from in Charlotte, where I grew up in West Charlotte, our neighborhood is a single dwelling neighborhood, and now we've decided, the council has decided, and zoning has decided to allow other types of housing, multifamily housing, multi-dwelling housing. I think we have to consider that. And I also think we have to consider that we have to extend our ability to have people in our transit areas from the bus zones. I think the prior person before me talked about widening the sidewalks. I think we have to consider, when I first got here to Asheville in this position as a program director for the Costello House, there were some objections from the neighbors that we were here. We were a transitional housing facility for men in a neighborhood where $1 million houses and 900,000 price houses are. So there was a conversation with the neighbors, a conversation about what was coming here. And one of the most important things that I didn't realize that was very important was the ability to talk to somebody when I had a problem. And so I think I don't think there's an easy conversation. I don't think it's an easy fix, but I do think that we have to consider rezoning those areas where we choose not to rezone like the suburban. I think we have to consider bringing other different uses in single family areas. We have to consider that as an option for affordable housing. And also, Vice Mayor, the living wage here in Asheville should be about $20.10 an hour. Right now, even if we had affordable housing, what does that mean for the person who can't afford, that doesn't make enough money to afford what we call affordable housing? So I think there's a multitude of issues. Again, a collaborative effort between merchants, owners of businesses, and the council as we talk right now. So I think that effort has to be that way. Sorry for a long answer.
Councilwoman Mosley or Rooney, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I wanted to I had a couple of questions, but once you mentioned the work you do at Costello, it leads quite nicely to the question I've been asking about how do we balance what is certainly a need for growth with what neighborhoods say they want. And then it also made me think of something that someone else who previously interviewed for this role mentioned, and she spoke of a non-displacement ordinance. Once you mentioned Mr. Moritz, it was clear to me that you reviewed the previous interviews. So I'm wondering if you have an opinion on what Ms. Bean said, and if you can remember what I initially asked, how do you balance the needs of growth with the neighborhood needs?
I don't think that's an easy answer, but I do think I'll go to, I don't know if this is an exact response to that, but there's a new housing administrator or person in charge of housing now. Can't remember her name, but one of the models that she's created is that we will go from this place where we just send people with a voucher to housing, and we don't train people to be better. We don't give them education. We don't get them to things like mental health. We don't give them substance abuse training. We don't give them classes on budgeting, so that when someone goes into housing, like for instance, for me, when a person leaves here, I'm reluctant to send them to public housing because of the climate and the type of people that are in public housing. But I think that conceptually what the new director has trying to suggest is that I think we need to consider, how do we balance it? I think we allow ourselves to have more affordable housing if we can have people to move in areas like that. I think you talked about displacement, and that part of the displacement part, I think Miss Karen, I looked at hers and I thought that talking about displacement, how do we balance that with bringing new units in and not sending people out who maybe can't afford to live there? I think we have to still go back to living wage. What are people making? Can they afford to stay there? So I don't know if that answered it 100%, but I think we do have to consider the fact that it's hard to live in Asheville. Charlotte and Raleigh, you guys probably already know this, the ability to live in Charlotte and Raleigh, the cost is higher in Asheville than it is in Charlotte and Raleigh to live. So we do have that piece to deal with versus, and again, with the living wage standard that we have here.
Ms. Rooney?
Alvarez, you have already kind of answered part of my question because Chapter 7 of the UDO is about development. What are some of the creative solutions you would suggest and or some of the ways our zoning might be getting in the way of our goals around housing, core services, reparations, or climate and neighborhood resiliency?
I just, where the UDA is concerned, I think if I go back to the single family housing model that we have is one that stifles our ability to be, it's a barrier kind of to growing in that regard. And recognizing that we just have to have conversations with the people that we are going to engage in that. And that conversation, this lady actually was crying on her porch telling me why she didn't want me here. And I think I remember also Councilwoman Mosley talked about being on the initial rejection of housing on the Maryland corridor. And even though that's a success. So I think that to answer that is that we just have to have those hard conversations about, because we have so much limited space, we're going to have to move in areas where we have land that people in single family dwellings don't want us to come to.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abernathy. Thank you. And at this time, we will move on to our third candidate.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jared Wheatley is our next candidate. Hi, Jared.
Good afternoon. Thank you, commissioners and council members for taking the time to interview us folks. Mr. Abernathy, you're a tough act to follow, but I'll try my best. I guess a little bit about myself is that I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I've moved back to our ancestral land back in 2009. I'm a resident of downtown Asheville, where I rent. I'm not an owner downtown. A licensed general contractor. I hold an undergraduate degree from Western Carolina University in construction management and my master's degree from Northeastern in commerce and economic development. I'm also an alumni from AB Tech, and I'm fortunate enough to have two kids who were both born at Mission Hospital and have been in Asheville City Schools throughout their education. So I guess I just lay all that out to try to say that my hope would be to bring a unique perspective to the Planning and Zoning Commission, really centered around equity and diversity, with a little bit of a focus on sustainability and placemaking. As a general contractor, I see a lot of folks with dreams and with aspirations in the city of Asheville. And that includes everything from residential construction to commercial construction. I'm more focused on the commercial side. I think we have a lot of opportunities as a city. We have a lot of cultural capital and also natural capital that make us very attractive destination to move to and to live in. And so I'll just kind of, I guess, leave it there and open up for questions.
Councilwoman Mosley or Rudy, do you have questions for Mr. Wheatley?
I'll just start with something very basic. Do you have any ideas about how to increase affordable housing in our area?
For sure. Got many ideas, some which may work, some which may not. Also, I'll say that I've reviewed the city planning back through 2009, and even in 2009, affordability of housing was a big topic and a concern coming up. I can say it appears, looking back at the data, each report, up in even the 2036 vision plan, is that we're not getting enough permitting through to even supply the housing that's being demanded. So if we're not at the top of the funnel capturing those permits, then those projects aren't going to be executed upon. One thing when I think about equity and diversity and inclusion, some of the other things that have been mentioned is adaptive reuse. I think may be underutilized in certain parts of our neighborhoods where existing buildings may be being either undervalued or potentially overvalued, and rolling those back into the portfolio and including those as potential wealth generation tools, which could be like, we think about condos, or we think about as for wealthy people. But actually condos can be made on a smaller scale for a diverse income bracket. And I think we could reimagine some of the developments that we're seeing around town and kind of shrink those down. When you shrink a development from 400 or 500 units down to 4 or 12 units, you actually also provide the opportunity for a more diverse set of developers to come in and pitch their ideas and reach out to capital and reach out to other nonprofits and to look for the city for guidance as well. And I think that opportunity will create even more diverse ideas and increase housing and the different types of housing that people desire.
Councilwoman Rooney, do you have any questions on this?
Thank you, Jared, for applying to be on our Planning and Zoning Commission for the consideration. I'm carrying the same question from last time. So we've included direction to revise Chapter 7 of the UDO. What are some of the creative solutions you've suggested? Some of you already brought forward. And also, what are some of the challenges that we face in meeting our goals around housing, core services, reparations, and climate and neighborhood resiliency?
For sure. I appreciate your question. First off is displacement and gentrification. It's really hard to combat displacement and gentrification because gentrification itself can sometimes be hard to define. And basically, the better a market gets, the more the price of these properties are going to increase along with the taxes. So for instance, like in Chapter 7, we can get in there and we can look at the nodes and the districts and maybe play around with overlays a little bit and our existing multimodal areas and greenways and look at those and maybe incentivize private development or public-private partnerships and development and help create density in areas that right now are facing a little bit of a challenge. But if as a community, we recognize that value of the public investment that's already been made, whether it's in greenways or sidewalks or bike lanes, that could be a really interesting incentive to put out there, as well as I noticed we mentioned flexible zoning, but not just flexible zoning, but also education for folks coming to the city about the ways that they may be able to engage that kind of economic activity of real estate investment. And that's what I would like to see Chapter 7 focus on, is that kind of, balance of nodes and districts overlays, and then the flexibility to provide particularly smaller developers. I'm a minority contractor as a a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And many of these contracts come out and they're actually too big or they have too much of an administrative encumbrance for me. I think we may see those same things in commercial and residential development in some of those areas where we'd like to see those diverse communities stay in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And I would like to ask a question as to what do you think is one of the most important things we could do or changes we could make in our zoning to actually benefit the community? What is your top one?
I think the very number one with a bullet is looking at parking requirements in and around downtown, and even into West Asheville, to be really honest. I believe housing is a human right. And I also feel with great certainty that parking is not a human right. Parking is a privilege and it's a sign of wealth that not everyone has. I'm fortunate enough to live within a block of a bus station, and I come home each night with my construction trucks, park, and I walk everywhere. And so when I see those parking requirements encumber people to activate commercial spaces or activate residential spaces, for me, that's, each one of those parking spaces comes with a cost, and that's a barrier to housing, and it's a barrier to small business opportunities as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
If there's nothing, oh, there we are.
And also, we did have a fourth candidate, John Michael Henson. He was not able to be here today, but he will still be one of the candidates that's listed. And also, I just wanted to say that the candidates that we had from the August 22nd meeting will also be considered. The names are Scott Lewandowski, David Moritz, Byron Griner, and Andrew Fletcher. And all of these candidates will be sort of voted on today at council at the 5 p.m. meeting. And at this, and we'll, like I said, encourage everyone to, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please check the resumes and documents online so you'll be familiar with the candidates when we vote today at 5. And there any objections or anybody would like to make any questions? Have any questions or anything?
How many seats are we filling?
We're filling 2 seats. Okay, we have 8 candidates now vying for those seats. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item of business is the proposed amendment changes to the Asheville Human Relations Commission ordinance. I'll turn it over to Elena Smith, staff liaison to the commission for more information. And this will have will be motion and vote to move on to council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So my name is Alina Schmidt. I am the analyst in the Equity and Inclusion Department, and I am staff liaison to the Human Relations Commission of Asheville. And we have before you today an item on proposed changes to the language regarding membership for the Human Relations Commission of Asheville. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of some key takeaways related to this item. The Human Relations Commission of Asheville was formed via ordinance contained in our city code, section 2185.25. And a portion of that ordinance deals with the membership selection criteria for the commission. Recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions involving admissions criteria at Harvard University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill have altered the law on considerations of race for admission or appointment. And in order to remain in compliance with these updated federal law, it's necessary to amend the HRC ordinance membership language. So the proposed amendment will maintain the commitment to provide equal access and opportunity for everyone, including historically disadvantaged groups. Next slide, please. So you might remember there have been some previous changes to the Human Relations Commission of Asheville ordinance. Earlier this year in January, the City Council voted unanimously to reduce total membership on the HRCA from 15 members down to 9. And this included an allowance of up to 3 members who reside in Buncombe County, but outside of the city. And then last year in September, the City Council voted unanimously to remove quotas and expand the list of groups identified as historically marginalized. Both of these changes came recommended by the Human Relations Commission, and the recommendations were moved on to council via the Boards and Commissions Committee both times. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned before the recent Supreme Court decisions involved cases with the University of Harvard and the University of North Carolina, which held that admissions decisions, including a racial preference, actually violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So in order to remain compliant with the court decisions, an amendment to the city's HRCA ordinance regarding membership is necessary. The recommended revision to the HRCA ordinance will clarify that equal opportunity shall be given to individuals or classes which have been historically disadvantaged. However, no racial characteristics will be a requirement of the membership. Next slide, please. So this is the current language about membership in the specific piece of the ordinance that we are proposing changes to the language around. Specifically, the text highlighted in light blue at the bottom. Currently, the ordinance reads, membership on the commission shall include but not be limited to the following. And then it lists some identified historically marginalized or disenfranchised groups. And then these are the proposed language changes to the ordinance in red. So the red text would replace the blue text to read, the consideration of appointment of members shall provide equal access and opportunity to serve on the commission to all historically disadvantaged groups, including but not limited to the following. Next slide, please. And then it would go on to read, as it currently does, to list out the groups that are identified as disadvantaged. Next slide, please. So to recap, the proposed amendment to the ordinance was supported unanimously by the Human Relations Commission on their September 21st meeting. And this amendment is necessary to ensure compliance with recent federal court decisions, but it continues to maintain specified equal access and opportunity for all previously included historically disadvantaged groups. And our suggested motion is to move to recommend the amendment to section 2185.25 of the Asheville City Code regarding membership and appointments to the Human Relations Commission, consistent with the accompanying staff report. And this is the end of the presentation. So myself and our city attorney, Brad Branham, can take your questions.
Okay, Councilwoman Rooney?
Yeah, Elena, thank you for that presentation. Can you put that last slide back up so that I am referring to the correct language when I'm referring to it? It seems to me, because we're getting some questions about this and because I still have questions, if we need to move forward with this and I want to support the HRCA's recommendation, I would feel more comfortable with it if we removed consistent with the accompanying staff report from the suggested motion. Because I still have questions about the federal court decisions and if we're over reading that or incorrectly analyzing the situation for the ripple effects that it may cause. I would be happy to move to recommend the amendment to section 2-185.25 of the Asheville City Code regarding membership and appointments to the Human Relations Commission of Asheville, period.
I'll second that because that's how it appears in our packet anyway, correct?
Okay, so we have a first and a second. At this time, we'll take a vote. Councilwoman Rooney?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
And myself, aye, and it unanimously passed and will be moved on to full council. Okay, thank you. And our next item of business is to make recommendations for board appointments. And at this time, we'll turn it over to Assistant Clerk Jerry Goldberg and the committee members to guide us through the recommendations and appointments.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Kilgore. We have a few to get through, but we will begin with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. There are currently 6 vacancies. The board chair recommends the reappointments of Brian Methvin and Scott Adams, and the appointments of Rita Lee, Jane Kristen, Chantel Simpson, and Stuart Zaitin. Are there any motions or questions?
Councilwoman Rooney?
What I hope to bring forward a consideration to my colleagues here is I think their recommendations are good. When I looked at what Jane Kristen brought with the national experience of renter solutions compared with Jen Hampton's, where maybe some more local experience. I know Jen's been following the TDA's LIFT process and is a recent resident of our housing authority neighborhoods. I wonder if we might substitute at this time Jen for the recommendation of Jane, knowing that Jane's application will be on file for a year.
Well, as a liaison, I'm inclined to lean into the chair's recommendation, but of course, Vice Mayor, if you feel differently.
Well, at this time, I'd just like to go with the staff's recommendation on this one. At this time, would someone
I'll make a motion to accept all of the chair's recommendations for reappointments.
And I'll second. Okay. We have a motion and a second. This time we'll take a vote. Councilwoman Rooney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
And myself, Aye, and motion passes. Thank you, Jake.
All right, thank you, council members. Next is the Civic Center Commission. We have one vacancy. The board chair, vice chair, and staff liaison recommend, in order of preference, Sean O'Connell, Erica Gifford, and Sean Comeau. And I apologize for the incorrect spelling of Comeau. There's only one E.
Okay, at this time, someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I have another recommendation here, having done a little bit of digging into some of the national experience that Sean O'Connell brings, Billboard articles, Bonnaroo, Creative Allies. But we do have some pretty heavy lifts coming up with the Thomas Wolfe recommendations, and I do think some local experience and relationships would be helpful while we're doing public outreach, considering I imagine it'll be on their work plan, which is why I would move to recommend Erica Gifford.
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This time we'll take a vote. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
And myself, aye, and it unanimously passed.
Thank you. Next is the Civil Service Board. This is for the council appointed position. There is one vacancy. The chair recommends the reappointment of Carter Webb. Carter Webb has served 2 full terms plus 1 unexpired term. On this board, there are no term limits. Therefore, the chair is recommending Carter Webb's reappointment.
Okay.
This is Kim, so moved.
Second.
Okay, great. It's time to take a roll call. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is the Downtown Commission. We also have one vacancy. This is to fill a resignation. Downtown Commission will be on the January appointment list as well, because that is when we have some expirations coming up. But the chair recommends the appointment of Jefferson Ellison for this position.
I think very highly of Jefferson, and I would love to make the motion for Jefferson Ellison to be appointed to the Downtown Commission.
I'd like to second that.
Hearing the enthusiasm that I share, I also just want to point out we had a lot of strong applications, which showed me that we have a lot of folks applying for multiple boards. That's a good sign. And also we have a broad interest in supporting downtown. I'm excited about Jefferson's application.
Okay, so at this time, we'll take a vote. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brody?
Aye.
And myself, aye, so motion passes.
Thank you. Next is the Human Relations Commission. We do have 4 vacancies. The chair recommends the appointment of Babette Freund and John Mile and the reappointment of Crystal Reed, while staff recommends the appointment of Jack Hoda and John Mile and the reappointments of Daniel Young and Crystal Reed.
As the liaison to HRCA and acknowledging they only have bi-monthly meetings, so it can be a challenge to make sure that we get everyone together and we have these hard conversations, but also bi-monthly. I want to start with a motion to reappoint Daniel Young and Crystal Reed, and then I'm curious what some of my colleagues might have to say about the other openings. Can we do those 2 separately?
Yes.
So the reappointment first. I move to reappoint Daniel Young and Crystal Reed.
Second.
Okay. So the motion is second. So Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
Myself? Aye.
And then I'm open to suggestions. Right now I feel the strongest about seeing the application for Jack Hoda from Western North Carolina Community Health Services, aka Wenches, as the HRCA hasn't in a while had someone with so much experience addressing the social determinants of health.
Okay. Are we going to do 2 at this time or just 1? I'd like to add John Mal to this motion.
I agree with both of those. So if you want to make a motion for Jack and John,
Yes.
I'd be happy to second.
Okay, great. And so at this time, we'll do a roll call. Councilwoman Roney?
Aye.
Okay, Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion passes.
And if I may just confirm, so that was Vice Mayor Kilgore making the motion with Councilwoman Mosley seconding and then unanimous, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. Next is the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. We did not receive any applications pertinent to zip code 28801. Therefore, we will continue to advertise. Moving on to the Noise Advisory Board, there are 3 vacancies, 1 resident, 1 restaurant, and 1 acoustic pro-related. The chair recommends the reappointment of Jess Santiago and Carmelo Pampionio, and the chair does not wish to make any other recommendations.
Yeah, Jerry, that was my question. Because Jeff's filling the resident seat and Carmelo's filling the acoustic pro or tech related seat, it seems like we need to re-advertise the third and maybe reach out to Asheville Independent Restaurant Association or something to invite that restaurant experience. Am I right?
Yeah, you are correct. We do not have an applicant for the restaurant because
Okay.
Lillian Woody is not interested in reappointment.
So I move to reappoint Jeff and Carmelo to the Noise Advisory Board.
I'll second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rooney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion passes.
All right, moving on then, we have Public Art and Cultural Commission. There are currently 6 vacancies. The staff liaison recommends postponing appointments until the January meeting, while the commission is working on changing an ordinance and bringing that to this committee to include changes to the membership structure.
Okay, Councilwoman Rooney.
My understanding is that when we don't fill openings, if members are willing to stay on that are currently serving, they can, because we haven't filled their seats. It looked to me like we might invite at least Andrew and Katie to stay on to help with that restructure process. So
And-
can we ask staff to do that?
My understanding is they have already agreed to stay on for that. I will reconfirm that, but yes, their appointment letters actually read until certain date or your successor is named. So yes, and I will.
Yeah, I know that could be a little bit of a lift to work on that restructure, and they both have so much experience on that board. I think a formal a invitation would be welcome and appropriate.
I'll reach out to staff if that is what you all wish to do.
And would someone like to make a motion?
Oh, sure. I'll move to leave the openings for the January meeting as recommended, but also direct staff to invite current members to stay on through the restructure process if they're able and willing.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rooney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion passes.
Moving on to Sustainability Advisory Committee, there are 2 vacancies, and both the staff and chairs recommend the appointments of Russ Thatcher and Christy Herbert.
I'll move to recommend Russ and Christy.
I had some curiosity about this. Y'all, I spent so much time reading through these. Some of them I had to read twice. There were some really good applicants in here. And I was thinking about the work plan and what we were asking our advisory boards to do around like our climate justice initiative and food systems and water quality. We know that French Broad and its tributaries, including Nasty Branch, have gotten some things on water quality that are concerning. And so I was looking at the recommendation for Christie's, where she brings a lot of the experiences with the other parts, but we have 2 applicants for water quality. One is Justin Young and one is Anna Alsabrook. They both bring water quality analysis to the table, and they also both happen to be renters. So when we're thinking about who's in the closest proximity to our water systems that don't have the best quality, it could be interesting to look at folks who have multitude of experience, which is why I wonder if you might consider a friendly amendment to recommend Christy Holbert and maybe Justin Young.
Is that a motion you're making?
Well, that's my amendment.
Huh?
Accept the friendly amendment.
Okay.
Thank you. So then it's Antoinette's motion and my amendment.
Okay.
Did you accept that, Councilwoman Mosley? Apologies.
I did.
Thank you.
Christy Hurlbert and Justin Young, correct?
Correct.
So we have a motion and a second. So now Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rooney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. So motion passes.
Okay, and moving on to the final board, it is the Urban Forestry Commission. There is one vacancy. The chair, vice chair, and commission members recommend the appointment of Chris DeFiore.
Okay, so moved.
Second, acknowledging that the UFC voted unanimously to uphold this recommendation.
Okay, so Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rooney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. And so that motion passes also.
I turn it back to you, Vice Mayor Kilgore. That completes the board appointments.
Okay, and lastly, I'll open up to the committee members and staff for an informal discussion or updates anyone would like to make. Councilwoman Rooney?
Yeah, I know we've got a long day today, so I'll try to keep this short. So I've been looking to see what other cities in North Carolina are doing around advisory board recruitment. And I know I've mentioned this a few times. The city of Durham has an advisory board stipend program as part of their recruitment efforts. And my understanding after talking with some of the Durham City Council members is that they might be able to make some more data available to us on how that's working or not working or lessons learned. So I wondered if we might put that on a back burner or maybe future agenda to maybe consider getting a conversation going. I'm not sure if my other colleagues here might be interested in hearing from someone from Durham since these meetings are virtual. I don't know what that looks like to ask that from staff, but I think it might help us as we're doing these longer application processes to kind of learn together.
Okay, well, Sarah, she has a comment. She loves it. Sarah?
You're muted.
We can't hear you. Well, we could tell from her excitement.
Yes, I think you're in the queue with the callers.
Are you giving us a thumbs up for that?
Call into the caller line.
I think
Sarah, do you want to come in here and give the update?
while she's doing that, I think what she's getting ready to
We're right
present.
across the hall from each other, so.
She's getting ready to present our department's 2024 work plan, and I believe that touches on it.
Yeah, I wondered if we'd skip the work plan and went straight to informal discussion. And I was like, I was going to bring this up in the work plan, but now it's in the informal discussion.
Yeah, the way I made the agenda, and I apologize, that didn't stick out as a separate item, but it is the work plan development with Deputy Clerk Sarah Gross presenting is next.
Sorry if you didn't catch that, Sarah. I planned to ask that related to the work plan, not the informal.
Okay.
Yes. Well, and I don't know what I missed, but I'm happy to note that is part of this council committee's work plan. And it's something that we have been exploring. So expect to see some updates here as well as the equity and engagement council committee. So we'll be touching on that towards the end of this quick presentation. All right. Hello, and sorry about all of that. All right, so just start us off with some key takeaways. As I'm sure the committee is aware, now all council committees have an annual work plan, which we're using as a tool to visualize and organize the work of the committee as well as the upcoming agenda items. These work plans are, of course, dynamic and serve as a guide for the work of the committee. So today I'm going to cover what's proposed for the Boards and Commissions Council Committee and then be asking for some feedback there at the end. So next, please. Just a quick reminder of the committee work plans are all informed by council's vision framework, which you see here at the top, as well as the strategic priorities, priority goals, and then of course this committee's scope. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the scope of this committee, Boards and Commissions Committee, is our oldest committee, which was was established for the primary purposes of making recommendations to boards and commissions to full council, which we just did a lot of today. Other duties include making the guidance of establishing new boards and commissions, as well as amending those establishing ordinances or resolutions, and then the timelines for appointments or interviews to these committees, and then any kind of board and commission related policies and evaluations that we'll see. Next slide, please. Connection to advisory boards. This committee is of course connected to all of our boards and commissions indirectly because of that establishing, but also the appointments, ongoing appointments to boards. Another committee to note is the realignment working group, which was created by staff and is serving in that advisory capacity to make recommendations on boards and commissions, which will be forthcoming to this committee as well as council. All right, so just an idea of those upcoming agenda items and what we can expect this fiscal year. As always, we will have some recommendations for board appointments. I'll note here that the committee recently voted to move from monthly to quarterly appointments. So we generally hold every other month meetings to accommodate those appointments. With that effort to rearrange or to reconstruct to quarterly, that allowed us in the clerk's office to expand our outreach efforts as well as training program updates. So we hope to give bi-monthly updates to this committee. And then on an annual updates, the clerk's office prepares a demographic report. And as you know, all of our boards and commissions prepare their annual reports, so we can expect to see those at the beginning of the calendar year, every year annually. And then some other upcoming policy items that this committee will be seeing is the realignment of boards and commissions project. I've noted that there is a working group who will be making an update they're analysts of the employee survey. Board member survey. And that is scheduled to be at this committee next month. We are also exploring, and this touches on what Councilwoman Romy pointed to. We're currently exploring or doing the environmental scan of compensation and accommodations for advisory board members. So I think both Brenda and Elena left, but we do have the policy equity team doing that deep analysis, and then it will be first introduced in equity and engagement, I believe by the end of the year. That could be November or December, and then of course coming to this committee as well. And then likewise with hybrid meetings, those updates are going regularly to equity and engagement, but we will also hear some updates here as we get closer to launching hybrid meetings for boards and commissions. Other big policy items that we see that we predict for the long term would be updating our rules of procedures, updating the application, and implementing any recommendations we might receive. So with that, is there any questions? Next slide, please.
Yeah, I guess that's great, Sarah. I mean, y'all have been working so hard on boards and commissions and getting folks back into a routine since we've moved to virtual and hybrid and working on all those things. The reason I brought up whether or not we should entertain maybe bringing somebody in is because sometimes like hearing what is and isn't working helps to bring the numbers off the page. I don't know if we have even capacity for that, but I'm happy to make any connections if that's helpful between the elected folks on the Durham Council. I know they're in the middle of an election season right now, but just let me know.
And I will say we have reached out to the clerk. She didn't have too much data to offer at that time, but we did say we'd probably be reconnecting. So it would be great to make all the connections we could.
Sounds good.
All right. And then I guess I'll close this out with some key takeaways. Just noting again that the work plans are to help us better organize agenda items and align strategically with your council's strategic plan. That was my quick update.
Thank you, Sarah. And at this time, I'd just like to check and see if we have anyone in the queue for public comment.
Oh, 1 second.
Yeah, like, wave bye to your other office.
Feel a little bit of a height difference here. No callers, she said.
Okay. Okay, so if anyone has any comments or anything before we adjourn this evening, this afternoon, actually. Okay.
See you later.
No.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. We are,
Apologies again. One thing, can you hear me?
who's talking?
One last thing I wanted to know, if the committee is okay with holding our November meeting, which I believe is the 14th. We do have 2 items that requested to be heard before the end of the year, that being the realignment working group and Public Art and Cultural Commission has proposed amendments that they would like to have heard. And holding that, I would propose canceling our December meeting if that works.
Okay. What does everyone think?
So the November would be on the 14th, and then we would cancel what would have been the 12th.
I believe, yes.
Okay,
That works.
works for me. And okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Okay, Jerry.
That is what I was going to bring up because she's
Oh,
in between offices.
Okay. Do we have any other comments or at this time? Well, we're adjourned. Thank you. See you all later. Bye-bye.